In the spring of 2007, a small plane landed in Florida carrying 17 tons of silver coins. Not a museum shipment. Coins pulled up off the floor of the Atlantic from a wreck a company would only call by a code name. Black Swan. Around 500,000 silver coins, hundreds of gold ones, valued at a stunning $500 million. The richest shipwreck haul ever recovered. Odyssey Marine Exploration, the company that found it, was a real public business, traded on the stock market, with sonar ships and robotic submarines and shareholders. And for a few months, it looked like the greatest payday in the history of salvage. 5 years later, a court made them give back every single coin. So you want to own a shipwreck salvage company. You picture the good version. A boat, a map, a hunch, and gold coins running through your fingers on the evening news. You find the wreck nobody else could find, and you are rich and famous and free. That's the fantasy. The reality is one of the strangest businesses on Earth, and it runs on a rulebook you have never heard of. So, what does it cost to go looking? Why does finding $500 million in treasure sometimes leave you with nothing? Who really owns a wreck at the bottom of the sea? And why do the smartest operators barely touch the treasure at all? Start with the split, because there are two completely different businesses hiding under one name. The first is the one you are picturing. Historic wreck hunting. Sunken galleons, lost cargo, gold that went down centuries ago. The romantic version, and financially, it is close to gambling. The second is the one that actually pays the bills. Commercial marine salvage. When a modern container ship runs aground, when a tanker is taking on water, when a cargo vessel is on fire off the coast, somebody has to go save it. That somebody gets paid whether or not there is a single gold coin involved. Same word, two worlds. One is a lottery ticket. The other is a business. Let's do the lottery first, because it is the one everybody wants and the one that ruins people. To hunt a historic wreck, here's what you need before you recover a single coin. A target, which means archives, old Spanish records in languages nobody in your office reads, so serious operations hire historians for years. Search vessel with side-scan sonar that costs thousands of dollars a day just to float. Robotic submarines that work thousands of feet down, running into the millions. And you have to survive the search itself, which can take years, burning fuel and wages every day on the chance that a shape on the sonar is the right shape. The class gap is enormous. At the bottom, a hobbyist with a metal detector on a beach. At the top, a stock-listed company with deep-water ships working a wreck 2 miles down. Same trade on paper. The gap in capital is the difference between a hobby and a $100 million gamble. There is an academic paper on this, and this is real, titled The World's Worst Investment. Add up all the money poured into treasure hunting against all the treasure ever recovered, and the industry has almost certainly lost money. Winners are famous. A far larger number of losers quietly went broke, and you never heard their names. That is the buy-in. Now here is who you inherit the moment you find anything. The government. When you find a wreck, you do not own it. Finding is not owning. What happens next is decided by a body of law most people have never heard of, and it is the single most important thing in this business. Maritime law splits what you found into two buckets. The first is salvage. If you save property at sea that has an owner, you are owed a reward, sometimes a large percentage of the value. But notice the catch. There has to be an owner, and you are giving it back. You are the paid rescuer, not the owner. A second bucket holds treasure that has been legally abandoned, where no owner exists. That is closer to finders keepers. That is the bucket everybody assumes they are in. And there is a third thing riding on top: obligation. A wreck is often a grave, and modern law increasingly treats a sunken warship as a protected war grave, off limits entirely. An old wreck can also leak fuel or munitions, and that becomes your problem. You inherit the liability with the loot. Here is the trap. Almost nobody is in the clean bucket. Because the ships with the richest cargo, the Spanish galleons stuffed with New World silver, were very often warships. And warships belong to governments. Governments, unlike a merchant who died 300 years ago, do not disappear, do not abandon their claim. and have unlimited lawyers. Which brings us back to that plane full of silver. Odyssey's Black Swan wreck was almost certainly a Spanish frigate, the Nuestra Señora de las Mercedes, sunk by British warships in 1804. Spain went to court in the United States and argued something simple. That was our Navy ship, still sovereign property, never abandoned. You do not get to keep it, and you do not even get a reward, because you had no right to touch a sovereign grave. And Spain won. Completely. A United States federal court ordered Odyssey to hand over all 500,000 coins to Spain. In February of 2012, the treasure flew to Spain aboard 2 military aircraft. Odyssey recovered $500 million and kept 0. Listen to that again, because it is the whole business in one sentence. You can spend years and millions of dollars, beat the ocean, find the richest shipwreck haul in history, and walk away with nothing. Because the law decided the wreck was never yours to find. And it got worse. A court later ordered Odyssey to pay Spain around $1 million for how it conducted the litigation. They found $500 million, and it cost them money. That is the trap that defines historic wreck hunting. Your success does not depend only on whether you find the treasure. It depends on whether a court, sometimes in another country, decides you were allowed to keep it. And you often do not know the answer until after you have spent everything. Now, the person this fantasy is built around, because his story is more brutal than the legend. Mel Fisher was a chicken farmer from Indiana who became a dive shop owner, who became obsessed with one ship, the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon that sank in a hurricane off the Florida Keys in 1622, loaded with silver and gold and emeralds. In 1969, Fisher started hunting. Every single morning, he said the same thing to his crew. Today's the day. It was not the day for 16 years. He lived on a leaky houseboat in Key West. He took out loans across the whole state. His staff and his lawyers went unpaid for months. Then it cost him something no ledger records. In 1975, one of his salvage boats capsized in the night. His son Dirk, his daughter-in-law Angel, and a crew member died. He kept searching. And then, the exact trap we just described. When Fisher started bringing up pieces of the Atocha, the state of Florida claimed the treasure belonged to the state. Fisher had to fight all the way to the United States Supreme Court, across roughly 8 years, before the court ruled the treasure was his. He had to win the courtroom before he could win the sea. On the 20th of July, 1985, 10 years to the day after the boat capsized, Fisher's crew found the main treasure. The mother lode, 40 tons of silver, gold, emeralds, over 1,000 silver bars, valued at around $450 million. 16 years, a dead son, years in court, and then the richest find of his life. We remember Mel Fisher because he won. We do not remember the hundreds who did exactly what he did, showed the same courage, and found nothing. So, if that side is a lottery, where is the actual business? In the other bucket. The unglamorous one. Commercial salvage. Here is what nobody making treasure documentaries tells you. The steady money is not in 300-year-old galleons. It is in the container ship that ran aground last Tuesday. When a modern vessel gets into trouble, the clock starts. That ship might be worth tens of millions, its cargo far more. If it sinks, the owner and insurer face a catastrophe. The lost value and the environmental disaster of fuel and cargo in the water. So they call a salvage company. And here is where the money actually lives, in layers most people never see. There is the salvage reward, decided in London after a successful save. There is wreck removal, where an insurer pays to cut up and haul away a ship that cannot be saved. There is cargo recovery for the cargo owners. There is emergency response retainer work, a fee for being on call before a ship is ever in trouble. And there is subsea work, inspecting pipelines and cables with the same divers and robots that hunt wrecks. Only one of those 5 looks like treasure. The other 4 are invoices. And the way that company gets paid on the dangerous jobs is one of the oldest and strangest deals in business. It is called Lloyd's open forum. No cure, no pay. The company agrees to try to save the ship. Succeed, and they get a reward, the amount decided afterward by arbitration in London, based on the value saved and how dangerous the job was. Fail, and they get nothing. They eat every cost, fuel, crew, tugs, all of it. And the amount is not even a number in the contract. It is decided later by an arbitrator. One trade writer described the whole sector in 2 words: feast or famine. A salvage company faces an unpredictable revenue stream, but has to maintain a steady, expensive base of tugs and crew sitting ready at all times. You pay to stand by for an emergency that might not come, and when it comes, you might still lose. That harshness had a cost. If a salvor spent a fortune preventing an oil spill, but the ship sank anyway, they got nothing. So salvors started avoiding the most dangerous, environmentally critical jobs. The industry had to invent a fix, a clause that covers a salvor's costs when protecting the environment. So somebody still answers the call when a tanker is breaking apart near a coast. Now, the ledger. On the cost side, tugs are enormously expensive to buy and keep, plus pumps, cranes, and robotic submarines. Then people, and this one is subtle, there is no salvage school. The skill lives in the heads of a small number of people, learned over decades, and you cannot just hire more when work is booming. Then readiness, the core cost, being ready for work that has not arrived. On the revenue side, it is lumpy. One big job can carry a company for years. A quiet stretch bleeds it dry, while the standby costs keep running. So which owners survive? First, they treat it as probability, not destiny. Losers fall in love with one wreck and bet the whole company on one job. Survivors never bet more on a single hole in the ocean than they can afford to lose. Second, the smart historic operators solve ownership before they get wet. They do not find treasure and then fight a government. They sign an agreement with the government first, splitting the fines before recovery begins. You trade a smaller share of a real prize for actually getting to keep it. Odyssey learned this the hard way. Others learned it for free. Third, commercial survivors are ruthless about which jobs they take, walking away where the math does not work, because no cure, no pay punishes heroics that fail. Fourth, they diversify beyond treasure entirely. The most durable salvage companies do not depend on gold at all. They do wreck removal for insurers, emergency response on contract, subsea work for offshore energy. Those jobs come with an invoice, not a lawsuit. The treasure is the story. The service work is the income. So does this actually work? Run both sides. The good outcome, on the treasure side, you found an ownerless wreck or signed a deal with the government first, and brought up a cargo you can keep. When that happens, the numbers are life-changing. On the commercial side, you had the crew ready, a valuable ship got into trouble, you saved it, and London handed you a reward that covers years of standby in one job. Now the bad outcome. On the treasure side, you spend years and millions and find nothing. Or worse, find everything and a court gives it away. Exactly like Black Swan. On the commercial side, the casualties do not come, your tugs sit idle burning money, and the one big job you finally get goes wrong. The ship sinks, and no cure, no pay means you funded the disaster for free. So the honest verdict. Shipwreck Salvage is 2 businesses wearing one romantic costume. The treasure hunt is one of the worst risk-adjusted bets in the world. A lottery where even the winning ticket can be voided in court. The commercial salvage business is real, durable, and deeply skilled, but brutal. Built on standby costs, lumpy revenue, and a contract that can hand you nothing after you risked everything. The people who get rich here are almost never the ones chasing the gold. They are the ones who own the boats, the expertise, and the readiness, and who rent all 3 to whoever is currently having the worst day of their life at sea. Here is the thing to remember. The next time you see a headline about sunken treasure worth $500 million, finding it was never the hard part. And finding it was never the same thing as keeping it. You are not buying a treasure map. You are buying the right to gamble against the ocean and the courts at the same time. And the only people who win reliably are the ones who stopped gambling and started charging by the day.